Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
That day was birthed into a yearly or an annual commemoration of that fact. Do you think that the very first Saba Saba worked? If you today have multipartism, did it work, that first one?
I think based off what they wanted to achieve to get into the era of multipartism, one would say it did work. Mm-hmm. But have we seen subsequent upholding of the achievements of the day? You know, because remember, Saba Saba has continued to metamorphosize to become something different. So it has been associated with the push for change and good governance over the years. So with that in mind then, from Saba Saba we now have multi-party democracy, but are we seeing the fruits of this multi-party democracy in the era where we are in today? These are the big questions, I think.
Of course, these are the questions, and they form the basis of the conversation that we'll be having this morning, because we're actually looking at the state of democracy. And we're not just going to do that in Kenya, but we're going to cross the border and do that also what happens in Tanzania. Because today, also in Tanzania, Saba Saba is being marked as a day when folks were fighting for more or less the same thing, the spread of democracy. So we're looking at the state of democracy today, marking Saba Saba Day in Kenya and Tanzania. Njeru Gathangu, who is the former Runyenjes Member of Parliament, and the second liberation veteran will join us at some point. But also here with us this morning, we're delighted to have Dr. Nicodemus Minde, who's a researcher and foreign policy expert, already with us in the studio. Good morning, Dr. Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
For us to then look into some of these matters, because it's a big deal with people in the streets and people who are protesting year after year after year for the last 36 years in Kenya. I don't know how many years now in Tanzania. But to then understand that there's something that people are fighting for. And so that's why we're going to deepen this conversation a little bit and see how far we've come. Before we get into it, Dennis is going to share today's proverb. We'd love to get your interpretation of it.
Sure.
Today we are in the first republic in the continent, Liberia, 1847. You know, a country of firsts, you know. So it is also the very first country to elect the first female president in the continent, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. You know, it is rich in iron ore, rubber, diamond, and timber. The proverb that you get from this country is interesting. Now, when spiderwebs unite, they can tie up a lion. When spiderwebs unite, they can tie up a lion. How would you interpret it?
Well, I think this is a proverb that reminds us about the question of unity and unity in strength, that in spite of the minuteness of a people or these insects like the spiders, they can, if they actually form some form of solidarity, they can even defeat a lion. And this is also a reminder of even Swahili proverbs that speak about unity in strength and umoja ni nguvu, utengano ni udhaifu. So this proverb really highlights the central question of unity. We're going to speak today about the centrality of the people in terms of demanding for greater accountability and democracy in East Africa.
Well said, well interpreted. I mean, went straight in, yeah? Well said.
Indeed. So let's look at this a little bit. Tanzania and Kenya commemorating this day yet again. And if we look at what's happened in the last almost 4 decades of this fight, and to really say, to have democracy is to be all-inclusive at whatever level, should be all-inclusive. Have strides been made? That's, no-brainer. Of course, strides have been made, but has impact been then recognized to the point whereby you can actually say, well, there's a functioning democracy that happens? Or, here's a crazy one, is it possible to say that maybe democracy is not the shoe that fits for, people? Is that even a conversation that's being had?
Well, I think we in East Africa, we have actually decided to choose democracy as a form of governance, and there are different interpretations of democracy, and of course this forms part of debate, academic debate, scholarly debate of what constitutes democracy. But democracy has certain pillars, or what we call the factors that contribute, that hold this democracy. One of them is the centrality of the people, as I've mentioned in the earlier proverb, but also looking at pluralism. That is not the idea that not one voice is required, but we're looking at the collectiveness of the people to make decisions. That is actually democracy. And then, of course, if you look at in terms of electoral democracy, is that we cede our sovereignty, part of our sovereignty, to the people who we elect to represent us in some way. So democracy has largely been understood as such, but of course there are different variants of what constitutes democracy, and the debates of whether it is what we really require in the largest African context. But back to your question of whether this we have made any gains, of course. Many countries have made a lot of gains. The democracy of Tanzania, Kenya has gone through different phases to the point now we are talking about second liberation, third liberation. If you look at the Kenyan context in 1992, where we saw the birth of a new form of, if you can call it a republic, in which now we moved towards multi-partyism, which also coincided, ironically, also with Tanzania. And of course, this is in the larger global context of the 1990 third wave of democratization, where we see increased plurality, multi-party democracy taking root. So we said that was a momentous period in terms of democracy in East Africa. But again, there's a worrying trend that this democracy, there's some form of a backslide of democracy. And whereas we looked at in 1990 the drive towards democratization, in fact, we scholars now look at it what we call the slide towards autocratization. So increased authoritarianism in the region, and it is taking shape in many contexts in the region. And one particular one, if we are to look at the three East African countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, it is quite a worrying trend in terms of what we are really seeing in terms of reduced civic space, constrained human rights that are people are really being contrived from their rights to participate, to agitate, to aggregate their issues, increased police brutality and the right. So we can say we are in a very difficult period in terms of East African democracy.
When we talk about multipartism and the push towards that, it was not an easy struggle. It is a struggle that unfortunately lives were lost. People were injured and maimed. And finally, it got here and we said, hey, voila, finally we are here. We are able to choose whoever it is we want to choose. We are able to fight for other rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, case of Kenya through the Constitution 2010. But as time have continued to pass, the more we've continued to slide back. And one asks the question, the idea of democracy as wananchi or the citizens are pushing doesn't seem to be the same idea of democracy that would be political class identify with. Why is there seemingly a difference or a misunderstanding between these two groups?
Well, I think this misunderstanding has been brought about by the leaders themselves. But the idea of democracy is a unifying thing that, especially in what we call representative democracy, where citizens cede some of their rights and sovereignties to these leaders through elective or elections. And that's why the fundamental preamble of many constitutions is we the people, and then now they cede this sovereignty through certain provisions, elective positions, representative positions, and the like. So ideally that should be the idea of democracy. And of course I understand where you come from, that there is some form of a mismatch of what the citizens conceive the idea of democracy, whereas there is another perception of how the leaders view democracy. And these two constituents, that is the people and the leaders, should work in harmony, because democracy is also about delivering of services to the people. And one of the drawbacks of recent in terms of why democracy is failing, and if you look at different surveys and studies around the future of democracy, is that there's a feeling that democracy is not delivering on development, and that is why you find there are those case studies where people say, look, there are countries that are autocratic or authoritarian that are actually doing very well in terms of development, and they cite the example of China, they cite the example of, for example, Russia and other autocratic leaderships or countries. But again, I think there are also good governance models that have also yielded some form of development, whereas when we have a representative democracy and democracy that really works for the people. So I think this mismatch is mostly brought about by the leaders that these people elect.
When one would say that democracy gives me the power to cede my power to you, some sort of power, but the very same democracy gives me the power to take that power back and transfer it to and cede it to someone else who's able to deliver based off our agreement, based off the promises you gave, based off the Constitution. But it's seemingly that what we see today is, once you cede your power, I will use that power to whichever way I see it fit. It's the reason why you'd see the examples you've given that we will see China are doing their thing, they're doing it well. Perhaps that's the direction we should go. But is there an understanding from, say, the political class that the power they hold does not belong to them? It is from the people, and that donated responsibility, as it were, demands that you deliver. If you do not, then you have no business being there.
Yes, I think that is why constitutions are designed the way they are. And you have rightly put it in terms of the functions of the president or these elected representatives, and what are their duties and functions of a member of parliament and other forms of representation. And that is why we, in ideal democracies, we have what we call term limits, which is very critical in terms of accountability purposes. And the best practice is terms, 2 terms of 5 years or 4 years. And it is from this that citizens can be able to judge whether or not their leaders have been able to deliver. And for me, I call that a civic duty of accountability, and accountability done through elections. But again, we see that of late, elections have not been able to really be a mirror through which we can say deliver credible leaders. Elections are becoming increasingly very the elections are not, they're terrible in terms of how the processes are not credible. They are frauded with a lot of mystery and all that. So you find that this electoral process that is enshrined in the Constitution also becomes part of the problem. So as much as citizens want to go to the polls to elect their leaders, it is this very poll that also brings about terrible leaders, of course. And of course, it has also, in many occurrences, we see that elections are also a time when there's a lot of tension in the country, and people even sometimes wish that we don't even have elections because of the anxiety that it brings, and it becomes a big problem. So again, I think I should urge that elections should be part of people's life cycles, where we put our leaders into account. If not, then it becomes a terrible process in the end.
Even as we've studied historically, maybe not gotten to the point where scholars such as yourself have, but then been able to see the things that have happened, because history forms the present, and then also it dictates, to a certain extent, how you're going to operate in the future, or it should. Unfortunately, that we've seen that we've left this behind. And maybe I'm a bit of an impatient Democrat when I say that. why can't we just seem to get it right? Everybody on paper upholds their constitution. 2027 is another election year around the continent. Kenya, Nigeria, some of the big names are coming up for election. Tanzania just did one last year. So did Uganda. Namibia and Botswana have come out of election cycle. South Africa is up for election again next year as well. These are big ones. And everybody's upholding democracy, and constitutionalism. But in each and every one of these countries, just taking Sabasaba now here as an example, there is an issue that clearly points towards unconstitutionality in every one of them. And I'm just reading a comment that somebody has said that deeply ironic on Sabasaba Day that Kenya is again choking in dissent. Civil society notified for peaceful marches against killings and bad governance, yet faces police lockdowns, checkpoints, and unlawful assembly threats, violating Article 37. Doc, why can't we just, if we say we have it, we have constitutions. You brought up China as an example. Well, China has the Democratic People's Republic of, I beg your pardon, the People's putting democracy, the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. It is clear what their constitution says, and they follow it. They have talked this. It's not just laced; it's heavily drenched in totalitarianism and authoritarianism. They know what they're in for, but the problem is what we're saying here. You talk one thing in your constitution, you say it because it sounds sexy on the global scene, but what you practice is something totally different. Why is it so difficult for us to just cross that threshold and say, if it is not the democracy that we practice, then let us know what it is? Why is it so hard?
It's so hard because one of the things that constitutional law experts say is what we call constitutionalism, which is the culture of constitution. A while ago, I think you hosted Pielo Lumumba in this show, and he spoke about Okothogendo, his constitutional lawyer, lecturer, professor, who says that what we're experiencing in the moment is that a country of constitutions without constitutionalism, cultures of constitutionalism. So we find that democracy is also about values, certain values that countries choose to uphold. And some of these things are, they go beyond what is just written in the Constitution. For instance, the value of obeying the law, or following the law, all right, and the value of certain disciplines. For instance, I was speaking earlier on with one of my colleagues, is why is it that once you stop at the red sign, someone behind you hoots at you and wants you to just, no. So we have this culture of impunity that has become part and parcel of our country, of our culture. So I think the question that you're asking, Dewey, is that why is it very difficult for people to really abide and follow these prescripts of constitutional? I think it is a matter of choice. But again, it is important that citizens choose to uphold certain values. And these values are not just about political institutions. It starts all the way from family values, how you bring about these children at home, the values that we get from school, the values that are taught in our socialization, such as faith and places of worship and the like, and how we choose this some form of a social contract between ourselves and between ourselves as a people. How do we abide and decide that this is what we have decided to do as a country, as a people, as Kenya, as Tanzania, or as Uganda? And I think that becomes a big part of the question that you're asking, that we have not been able to really understand what are the values that unite us as a people, and this makes it very difficult even to forge a united future for our countries.
Would one therefore be right to say that democracy as like Undu would say, it's a sexy word that does exist, but implementing democracy as would be is where we draw the line? We will not uphold this democracy. So would one therefore be right to say that we see lack of democracy as one would describe it because there is no intention from the ruling elite?
I don't think it should just be about intention, and that is why the collectiveness of our people is what actually informs nations. Nations are built on a shared history, collective sense of our current, and a collective desire for our future. And this is what makes nations what they are. And nations that are if you drawing from history, nations that have chosen that this should be our path towards making our nations great, or this is what we aspire as a people. This is what drives us is both the combination of people and the citizens, and that is why we have constitutions where we spell out our values, we spell out what we really think should be our aspirations for our country, and if not, therefore we just become countries that without any foundation whatsoever, and makes it very difficult even to forge a united future. And for if you look at the current situation as it is at the moment, it's quite depressing, and one will ask what really is the future of Kenya, of Tanzania and Uganda amidst all this deteriorating democracy, rise of authoritarianism, personalized leadership, repression by the state, abuse of human rights, reduced civic liberties, and so on and so forth. It becomes very, very difficult even to imagine a future for ourselves and even our children. Yeah.
And even as we do come back and look at the conversation whereby the people who have the positions to vanguard over this democracy that we speak about, what have they done with it over the last, few years? And what can we look forward to? We're talking this morning with Dr. Nicodemus Minde, and we're having a conversation around Sabasaba Day in Kenya and East Africa. What does it mean exactly? The struggle from years ago, what has it reaped today? We'll be back. It's 8:30. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your... This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
I am about 370 kilometers from Kenya's capital.
Different towns.
Tunashika doria na kupiga mbizi kutoka kaunti 001.
Wameendeleza hamasa katika maeneo mbalimbali.
Different voices.
Kutoka kaunti za Kakamega, Vihiga, Bungoma.
Mvutano wa uongozi wa the Nairobi Hospital ukiendelea kushika kasi.
One story.
After a whole day of deliberations, all eyes are now on the government.
Resign and surrender to the police.
It's no longer a matter of if but when they will unveil their presidential ticket.
It has been a week characterized by vulgarities from the political class.
Wherever you are, we are 24/7 with news that make your day count.
Kutoka Voi, mimi ni Hezron Kimari.
Kutoka kaunti ya Nakuru, mimi ni Ken Gashuhi.
I'm Bramwell Bwire reporting live from Kisumu CBD.
Reporting for KTN in Nyeri County. My name is Clement Masombo.
Tobias Chanji, KTN, Mombasa County.
And Musungu, KTN, Nairobi.
Elvis Kosgei, KTN, Uasin Gishu County.
This is KTN.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Parliament and a second liberation veteran joins us in the room this morning. Good morning.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I'm late.
Karibu sana.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today. And I guess you're coming into the conversation. Dr. Minde was going to tell us as we get into this and we continue this is that the folks who should be the vanguards of this constitutionalism and democracy as we see, the people who have the responsibility, that's why they hold up the Constitution when they are sworn in at whatever level. How have we seen that their impact has been felt over years to ensure that the people are actually protected by the Constitution that they voted for?
Well, I think that is actually one of the biggest ironies, and find that these leaders will hold this constitution up high in the right, I think, right hand, or is it left hand, and swear to protect and abide by the constitution, and of course put the people at the center of their policy actions. But we find that they never do this in many occasions. It's just a performative act, and if you look at the Constitution, that particular act is it's symbolic in the sense that this is the Constitution. This is a document that we have decided as a people to really protect our rights, to give us directions as a nation. Mm-hmm. But again, remember, as I told you, this is in representative democracies. We have ceded some of our rights to these leaders so that they can be able to really tell us or to direct us and lead us to this desired future. And most of the time, this does not really happen. But again, it is the self-correcting nature of this constitution that there are certain provisions that have been put in terms of bringing these leaders into account through either recalls or through other elections where we can vote these people out and bring other people in. But again, we are also challenging even the very concept of elections, as I've said earlier, that these elections again are becoming very meaningless in terms of, they don't deliver what people really want because they are shrouded in they are unfair and mysteries of electoral malpractice and the like. So this becomes one of the greatest ironies of even the Constitution and the leaders that we have.
Yeah, but Njeru, as a second movement liberation veteran, one would say, you look at where we find ourselves today, multi-party democracy, the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Today, as a veteran, would you say that Kenya has achieved that which you sought out to give to Kenya at the time? Are you happy with where we are today?
Yes. It's good that I have met Dr. Minde talking about democracy. And one of the things that made us to move this society to be able to demand some of the rights and freedoms that we wanted. And more than that, to create Kenya into a plural society was that people were missing the democratic space and participation since 1969. And that all that time, we had been struggling to make sure that the de facto one-party state is done away with and introduce multipartyism. Right? Mm-hmm. But instead, in 1982, then they overturned all that again and created the de jure one-party state, meaning that the people did not have any way of assembling or creating themselves into groups that would be talking about democracy or political parties or whatever it is they wanted to do with the state in those days. So we moved to do this. And unfortunately, we decided that it could be done in any way. That from 1969, it had been done that way by force. Did away with democracy by force and made sure that you have changed the constitution to create KANU as the state party, meaning that it was extreme. That was more than communism. Communism that was loaded on us, as victims. Walikuwa natuita vinyangarika. ambao kazi yao ni kufuata wa Russia na wa China, but that is exactly what they were doing by creating Kenya to be a one-party state, right? So we were fighting to turn that out. Now then, what has happened since then? Democracy has got a problem. And it is good that people continue to reflect on it, because majority of societies follow what the majority thinks. That is why everybody in politics wants to create waves, so that people can follow, like mob justice. Just follow without thinking about the democratic values, the rights and freedoms of the people, and what ideas people are bringing to the table that can change society. And therefore, even after the 2A was removed from the Constitution, democratically, Moi and his people created an environment where majority would be against the minority, and that minority was actually the right one, right? Up to this day we are talking about, what has been happening is majorities are doing a lot of things, but they are all against people's aspirations. People are complaining downstairs, and what happens? Then they have discovered that use of money is an easier way, to create themselves and maintain power. They get out there, take our money, take our own money from the taxes, from the coffers. They go and distribute to the same people that paid the taxes. And the people are very impressed because they've been kept ignorant, they have been kept poor, and therefore they wait for whoever gives them. It's a shame.
But are the people frustrated? And I think this is the question that then comes out in Kenya, in Tanzania. I mean, go back to Tanzania when the election last year, and it would appear as though, if it was a small section of people, I believe we had a conversation here on the day, a small section of people, a large section of people who were frustrated with the way things were, but still seemed to vote, and I put that in air quotes intentionally. You talk about a time when the second liberation was coming through, but to date, those things seem to happen. In some cases, have been exacerbated by constant greed. And I go back to the question, are people frustrated? Because if they were, then we would see the decision that would lead to a change in leadership be taken, but that has not happened.
We have to think about what emotions and the psychology that is employed, because in the last elections, 2022, about 18 million people did not participate in voting. 9 million were registered but did not vote. 9 million were qualified to take ID cards, they did not, and therefore they were not qualified to vote. What that means is that people are frustrated. They don't see the need of elections, And the reason is this, that our intentions in the first Sabasaba to create a democratic Kenya where everybody will be participating has been trodden on, meaning that people have started losing interest in elections. They don't see why. Because after all, we are the majority. When we do it, we are ignored, we are suppressed, and therefore ignored completely. And so the best thing to do is keep home. And if I'm going to vote, then I'll wait until whoever comes to give me, gives me, that I can go to the debate. If nobody comes, I don't.
Yeah. You see, Dr. Ri, frustrations that we continue to see even at the time when fight for more multi-party democracy. One of the things that was there is you picked up, you're detained without trial, And you look at in 2026, talk about Tanzania, talk about Kenya, talk about Uganda. The same is being applied. We've christened it nowadays as abduction, but it's just detention without trial because individuals are picked, they are tortured and released after a few days. We still see the same being applied today. Frustration still does exist. When will we get outside this shackle of operating extra-constitutionally? And what must Wananchi, together with the political class, do to attain the idea of democracy that we dream of?
Well, I think to also put it to larger context, we also have to appreciate that and look at global trends. First of all, I think one of the things that is emerging is that increased authoritarianism or the backsliding of democracy is a global trend. And these models of democracy and democratization that many countries looked up to, for instance, the United States and other model countries in Europe, they have also been experiencing this backsliding of democracy or retreat of democracy, as the literature calls it. And this becomes a big challenge that even America, which was this supermodel of democracy, it's been challenged in terms of backsliding. But again, back to your question of what has really, these things continue to be the same in 2026, which is similar to what happened with my colleague Gathangu in the 1970s, 1980s. One of the issues that is emerging is also what we call, what he has termed as youth apathy, electoral apathy. People do not feel that their vote mean anything whatsoever. Just look, Tanzania, last election. It is believed that there were no elections, right? But the electoral results show that the winner got 98% of the vote, which is quite
interesting.
It's quite interesting, if you might put it, because we all know that voting did not take place, and so it is through such case studies or examples that Njeru Gathangu, this is where this point comes into play. Why would it interest me to go to vote in 2027 in the first place? And so these electoral or elections that have been provided by the Constitution as avenues through which we can aggregate our interests, through which we can be able to put our leaders into account, mean absolutely nothing. And now go back. Look at the other thing that ails our democracy at the moment is what these leaders do is they ride on this ethnicity profiling and identity politics. And so people continue to be divided. And if you listen to even the conversations around the country, it is absolutely disheartening that we now look at politics in certain lenses. Yes, we say that June 2024, with the Gen Z protest, ushered in a new era through which we can say our democracy has changed. But look, these leaders continue to ride on this ethnification of our politics to divide the people. And if you look at contemporary conversations or everyday conversations, on radio or social places, people still talk about this very, I find to be quite, it's sad in terms of how we view our politics. And I think it is time that we remodel our politics beyond these ethnic lenses through which we'll see, and we can therefore say we are going to have a democratic country and bring about those changes, bring to account the leaders that we have actually elected.
When we look at going forward, because you can't
stay there forever.
Yeah, absolutely. That there's something that you must do. And obviously, you look at nations, it must be collective in terms of an effort. And I think about when we read about the things that used to happen 36 years ago that led to this, where you needed people to come together.
Yes.
Njeru, that there was a spirit that was very alive at the time that said, you know what, if we are going to take the next step, that we must then be able to come together on this one place that we all agree. Do you still see the same spirit present today that then can be picked up for people to say, come on, we need to then be able to cross this line?
Yes, it is frustration and the pain it causes that makes people be mobilized. You know, I remember those days we had to consult a lot, and we started what we called the father figures. Our father figures then were led by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Bildad Kagia, Achengo Neko, Lukobok, such people. And when we went to Jaramogi, he said, before we make a decision, go and talk to Bildad Kagia about this. Go see Achieng' Oneko now. Go see Lukobok. And after all those consultations, we went back to him and he said, go and do what it is that we must do. Let us involve as many people as possible for them to understand where we want to go, right? And we went out. And the next people that we brought together included Kenneth Matiba, not Charles Robia. Charles Robia joined later with Matiba himself. And then we talked to Simeon Nyachai, who had been frustrated and humiliated by the system then. They kicked him out of the chief secretary's office. You know, Matiba had been humiliated in Muranga. So all those fellows and some grievance, we brought them together and we said, let us move. And everybody was so frustrated because of the Mlolongo elections that people felt that they should do something. Right now, that frustration is back in this country, where people have lost their own children. People have lost property. People have lost businesses. They have been denied and deprived. Their lands have been grabbed, you know. But I must say this. The first thing that people must appreciate, my sister, is that, one, who are the players in this politics? Who are the actors? Now, if you look at Kenya, and you take the first 9 or first 10 gentlemen that are playing politics today, you will see a relationship between and among them. Some of them are brothers and cousins, right? Brothers and cousins. All of them. It's only about two or so who are special recruits of Moi and Kenyatta that are still around. Right? People talk of family dynasties. This is not families dynasties, families. It is a Kenyatta dynasty, Jomo Kenyatta dynasty. What he created, it is what is playing. You know, he left him behind with the British, patrons of Kenya, people who will be looking after the interests of the British, you know, and they still continue here. You know, some of those characters have taken as much as 3 million acres where many Kenyans don't have nothing, right? And therefore, Kenyans have remained landless, Kenyans have remained poor, and so they are manipulated and driven like donkeys. One of the things, therefore, we must appreciate is this. What is opposition and government in this country? You know, so you will see that the government and the opposition are one. And they have been playing that with since 1948. You know, wakati wakau, right? They have formed themselves that one part is in government and the other one is in the opposition. The opposition has a lot of them, but they are all related to the government, you know, meaning that the people have to appreciate that before we go to say we are going to elect, because you are actually electing the same character, right? And so that is what I would say. In 1977, in 1990, when we went for this, we identified the people who are Kenya's enemies, right? Some in the opposition and some in government, right? And we said if we are going to work, let us not involve these characters because I want Yusumu yetu, right? And therefore, we need to do that now. And I'm not sure if we named them up kwa spies it will not be very good because people will come throwing stones, and I have had some of those stones thrown at you. You know, but what I want to say is this: free press assistant Ruto and his government, you know, to be what they are. If they were not reported those days that he has gone to this village, because he covered about 9,000 villages in Kenya, you know, if they were not reported, it was equal to we was not there, isn't it? But the press reported him, including the Standard and KTN. He should not harass us. You know, he has denied you people artifacts. He has denied the nation the business. He has given it to Star. And not that I am against the Star. I had a column in the Star. But I'm saying this, it is not fair, you know, for us to do this, because the way he is denying the people is the way he is denying media. Who will say when he is in trouble? Because when he is in trouble, we would like to know that we can assist him.
I mean, Dr. based off just what Njeru Gathangu has just raised, we look at a situation where all the changes that need to be there have to be exercised, or the change we seek has to be done in a democratic manner. Unfortunately, based off your statement as well, you've said that elections in one way or the other is not making sense because it is not bringing in the change that people want. So then, what conversations must citizens have among themselves with regard to the kind of change they want to see, and who is best suited to give them that change, so that instead of seeing numbers of electorates going down because elections is not making sense to them, they would have a reason to come out, to vote, to put people to account for the positions they've been given for us, to say this democracy is bearing some fruits and is making sense to us today?
I think that's a very good question, and what you are trying to ask is, are there alternative ways of organizing? Mm-hmm. Yes, there are plenty of ways of citizen organization and what I call citizen agency at the community level, at the religious level. Talk about community organizing, religious organizing, civil society organizing, youth organizing, and look at changes that have happened in history. I'm a great student of history and read how societies transform, and it is through social movements that actually true change happens. Youth organizing themselves and agitating for greater changes. Look at the transformation that South Africa went through, the apartheid. It was not just about the political leaders. Of course, there's the role played by Mandela and other ANC leaders and those who suffered and who died and who are not able to make it to post-liberated South Africa. But it is through different forms of organizing. The youth, those kids in Soweto, taking up stand and deciding that we are not going to take up Afrikaans as our language. So all those forms of protest done at the very community level is the essence through which we can push for changes, and it is from that then we can now move towards the state level or the regional level, where we can now push. But again, the state has also realized that there are different ways through which these now people are organizing, and they are clamping down on these forms of organizing, as you have seen in Kenya and East Africa. Like today in Tanzania, it's supposed to be a day of protest, and of course the desire for change and putting leaders into account. But the state has said no, you cannot organize. They bring in police all over this country, so they are also stopping these ways in which young people, civil society, and other forms of community organizing are meeting in order to bring about change. And it is quite sad. And societies that, whenever they are pressed like this, is this one, you find increased protests. And even in other cases where we've seen in other society where it leads to forms of revolutions or upstaging of government. So we don't want to go that way. We want to agitate our interests and articulate our issues in a democratic setting. But if societies, and we have seen this in history, are continuously pushed, then they lack these avenues to speak, to agitate, to call into account these leaders, and therefore we go the Bangladesh way, we go the Arab Spring way, and many other forms of protest that have actually led to bloody revolutions.
If we zoom out and we can take Sabasaba Day and look at other parts of the continent as well, but is it a day where you just remember what happened on the 7th of July 36 years ago? Or are you saying that there are still things which were fought for then that must be fought for today, and that it's not just a commemoration, but that it is a desire to see certain things fulfilled within the Republic, Kenya, Tanzania? What is it?
You see, when you look at Section 37 of this Constitution we are talking about, you see that it gives you the right to do a few things, to assemble. You don't just assemble and sit, you assemble to talk. Right? And then they tell you that you can demonstrate out of that out of that assembly, you can demonstrate about the things that you feel should be done. And secondly, is that when you have done that, you can raise a petition that you are going to give to the people, to the government, about what it is that you want. And then in the end, if there are people who you think, like if you are a trade union or you are a group of people pushing for something, and there are those people that are against it, you can picket them. You tell them, no, you cannot continue this way. But peaceably and unarmed, meaning that you are supposed to use your tongue, to persuade these people, right? Now, so the first Sabasaba was to push for those changes. Did we get the changes? We are saying today that a lot of things that we demanded were actually still denied, right? And so people are back to where they were in 1990. So meaning that we need to start doing things. And those things are supposed to be through the petitions we are talking about. Today, the young people have announced they are going to demonstrate. And raise petitions to the state to say what it is that they would want to see done now, including addressing the people that have been arrested and killed and what have you, those issues, and looking at what is it that we are still deficient in that the government can address.
Yeah.
Now, that is what is supposed to be happening, not just to commemorate the day by dancing. In fact, what I see the government thinking is that we shall be having and organizing processions, not demonstrations, processions, like we see with the Salvation Army. You just walk on the street singing. That is what the government wants to see. They want to see that we are walking on the streets praying rosary like the Catholics do. That is what they want. They want to see us walking like Boy Scouts, saluting them and Girl Guides. But that is not the spirit of the Constitution. The spirit of the Constitution is to remind the state what it is that the aspirations of the people should be. And two is that if they are not responding to what the people say, they demand in whichever manner, not like Gachagua said yesterday or the day before, which I was very unhappy about. Gachagua stands up and says that the young people have said they are going to demonstrations. But I want to advise you, and I have got information, that if you do, they are going to kill you. So keep in the house. Keketini, kaeni hapo kwa nyumba, so that you are safe. And what I was saying is this. Gachagua has told me many times through many statements, kwa television, kwa radio, that he is a son of Mau Mau. Mau Mau did not go to bed. They went out to work, to fight, right? Now, when he tells the people that he is mentoring to go to sleep, instead of demanding for what changes it is they want, according to me, was limiting the determination of the people and actually cowardly.
Njeru Gathangu is a former Runyenjes Member of Parliament and the second Liberation veteran, you can tell by his words. Dr. Nicodemus Minde is a researcher, foreign policy expert. To have this conversation in your presence has been great. Thank you very much for joining us both this morning and able to look into what we can remember then going into the future. Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a spot check around what's happening around the city in a bit when we come back. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.